So over the past 6 years, I've worked with over 100 companies ranging from small local shops all the way up to major corporations like Adobe and Royal Caribbean. But there's some things I wish I would have done smarter that would have sped up my results significantly. So to make growing your content business like 10 times easier, I'm going to give you 13 brutal business truths that I wish I knew sooner. Lesson number 1. So have you ever noticed how brands never ask you about what kind of camera you're shooting with or how many megapixels it has? It's because they literally do not care. But when I first started, I cared a whole lot, mostly just because I was trying to flex on other photographers who use gear as like a flex. And I kind of justified it in my mind that it was not a flex on other photographers, but actually the better gear that I had, the more I could charge. But in reality, I upgraded my gear and I could not charge a dime more. But there are some other things that I changed that did make a massive difference in terms of how much I could charge. So I'm going to be talking about those in later lessons. But that's why lesson number 1 is to not get distracted by gear because, worst case scenario, you can always just rent it. And this tip alone will save you thousands of dollars and a ton of headaches. Lesson number 2. So have you ever been editing at like 2 a.m., making micro adjustments to things that literally no one will ever notice? Increasing contrast by, then down 2, then, saturation bump 1 or whatever. The thing is, no one will ever notice that except for us. And like even you probably don't notice it, but you waste hours doing it. So the question is why? Well, the reason is perfectionism. And I personally am super guilty of it. And not just in editing or color grading or whatever, but it actually spilled into all areas of my life. So I wouldn't even send messages. I wouldn't send DMs. I wouldn't get on sales calls. I wouldn't do any of those things because if I didn't feel like I would be perfect, I didn't want to be perceived as not being perfect. So therefore, I just didn't do it at all. But the truth is, you won't be great when you start, and that's just the default option. But the only way to get great at something is to continue giving yourself reps. And the only way to do that is to press send, press post, to take the call, to send the message, and get the reps. Which is why my second lesson is that perfectionism is actually the enemy. So you want to take messy action, and you'll thank me later. Lesson number 3. So you probably hear this all the time, don't compare yourself, create in a bubble. And while I definitely understand that sentiment, I actually completely disagree. See, because the only way to actually know if you've improved is to compare your current results to your previous results. And if your current results are better, then that means that you've improved and you can continue doing those things and make iterations. But if your current results are worse than your previous results, then there's something wrong and you got to go back and switch it and make some tests to figure out what was wrong there so you can actually make more improvements. So the point here isn't to stop comparing yourself altogether. It's actually to only compare yourself to the things that matter. So if you're comparing yourself to things like style or vanity metrics or popularity or any of those kind of things, those just make you kind of feel bad at the end of the day and they don't actually propel your career forward. But if you're comparing yourself to hard data points, then you can actually make those improvements based on your previous results. And the quicker and faster you do it, the quicker and faster you'll actually start winning with your business. So just give you a quick example. So for a long time, I would just post content out there. I wouldn't really study it. I wouldn't compare it. I would just throw it out there and like hope something good happened. But when I started studying what had done well in the past, I basically took those concepts and I made small iterations on them, or I literally just reposted them and made them just slightly different. And a crazy thing happened. They actually started to do better. So my ads started to do better. My client results started to do better. And ultimately I was able to get crazy case studies and charge a whole lot more money. But that was only because I was comparing my previous results to something that I was currently working on. And that's why lesson number 3 is that you need to compare yourself, but compare yourself to the right metrics. Lesson number 4. So if you are currently in a stage where you're just struggling to get clients, you don't want to add more to your plate by doing Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn and email and everything, right? Because what ends up happening is you spread yourself way too thin and you get no results with anything. So if you're actually serious about growing your content business, you really only need to focus on 2 things. The first is getting more clients, and the second is getting those clients to pay you more money, more times. So if what you're doing does not optimize for either one of those 2 things, then just stop doing it because it's just a complete distraction. And that's why lesson number 4 is that you have to have extreme focus on just 1 to 2 platforms max. And if you want my recommendation, I recommend Instagram and email. And then once you have enough clients to be full-time, then you can think about maybe adding on some other platforms. Lesson number 5. So when was the last time you bought a camera without reading the reviews? My guess is probably never. But why? Well, it's because that you want to know that the camera is actually worth the money before you spend the money on it, right? Well, your clients go through that exact same buying process. They want to know that you are worth the money before they invest it, which is why lesson number 5 is that you need to optimize for getting results ASAP, ideally before you even get paid. So if you don't have any proof of results, you're going to be stuck charging maybe a few $100, maybe up to $1,000 total for a shoot. But if you have hardcore proof of results, you can virtually charge whatever you want because you're viewed as an expert that can actually bring money to a company. Lesson number 6. So have you ever done a job where you accepted a super cheap or maybe even a free rate because the client bait and switched you into thinking that as long as you do this cheap rate, then you'll have full rate the next time we work together? Well, I don't know about you, but that never really panned out. Now, I'm not saying don't go out and do free work. I'm a huge proponent of free work, actually, especially when you're first starting, but you got to make sure that there's an equal exchange of value. So personally, I don't do free work unless I'm shooting to get a portfolio of a certain type of client or type of content that I really need that I don't have currently, or if I know that working with this client, I can get them amazing results and they'll either want to hire me or they'll refer me out to maybe some of their other colleagues. And in either case, it would be an amazing case study that I could leverage in the future to get even higher paid clients. So in other words, if the exchange is I get a free stay or I get a free product, personally, I don't think that's a great exchange of value because I can't leverage that to get more work in the future. So I wouldn't recommend that you do it, and I don't do it personally. Lesson number 7. So clients need to know that you exist before they can ever hire you. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's super underrated and a lot of people don't operate their business that way. So if you're not getting in front of new prospects every single day, then the chances of you getting new clients is virtually zero. And it doesn't matter if you run ads or if you do organic content or cold outbound or post on Craigslist, like who cares? It doesn't matter. It just matters that you get in front of decision makers every single day consistently. And that's why lesson number 7 is that photo skills will get you into business, but promotion skills will keep you in business. Lesson number 8. So would you rather be paid $5,000 for a single project, or would you rather be paid $3,000 a month for a 12-month contract? My guess is you'd probably take that monthly $3,000 check because that's like $36,000 a year for one client. But the crazy thing is most creators don't have a $3,000 a month package that they can even pitch to clients, let alone sell to them. So they end up spending their entire career just scraping by month to month and going on that revenue roller coaster where they never know where the next gig is coming from. And I don't know about you, but I think selling once and getting paid every single month for a year is much better than selling once and getting paid once. And that's why lesson number 8 is to build out retainer packages for your clients. And by the way, if you want to know the exact retainer packages that I pitch my clients, then you can check it out at the link in the description below. Lesson number 9. So have you ever been swamped with work and just kind of thought to yourself, man, it would be really nice if I had somebody to actually help me out with this? But then these negative kind of weird thoughts start coming up like, oh, I don't have the budget to hire people, or I don't have the time to train them, or my personal favorite, I can do it better than everyone else, so no one can do it as good as me. I've had those come up quite a bit. But the crazy part is I realized that I was short on budget and I was short on time because I was flying solo, literally doing everything myself. But the second I decided to hire a full-time editor, I basically instantly saved 30 hours a week of time. So this 30 hours is time I can devote to getting new clients, talking to new people, doing shoots, or just doing whatever the heck I want to do with my life. And that's why lesson number 9 is to hire before you feel the pain. Lesson number 10. So speaking of pain, it was 2021. I was just a few months away from getting married and I was waiting on payment from 4 different projects. So as you can imagine, the stress was mounting. And the crazy thing is I actually had contracts in place for each one of these because that's what everyone told me to do. They told me to get a contract in place because it'll protect you, but no one told me what actually needs to be in the contract. So I thought I was being smart. I basically just Googled a photography contract. I think I found a wedding contract that I just adjusted a little bit to fit my needs. I sent it off to the client. But here's the problem. I didn't realize that portrait photography contracts are very different than contracts with multi-million dollar, massive corporations. It's very, very different. And I learned that the hard way because that client is still using my content all the time and they still have not paid me and it's been years. That's why lesson number 10 is to have a proven contract and to understand all of the terms that are in it so that you don't get scammed. Lesson number 11. So have you ever asked yourself why creators that are dumber or lazier or maybe even less talented than you are making more than you? So if you're anything like me, you grew up with a hard work over everything kind of mentality. And I'm all for hard work. I'm a very hard worker myself. But what I realized pretty early is that just because you work hard doesn't mean that you're gonna make a lot. Because there's this other thing called leverage. And when you use it correctly, you can virtually run your entire business on autopilot. So I was talking to a client of mine the other day and he's currently doing around $20,000 a month profit with his company. So a little bit more than that top line. And he was telling me he literally only works an hour or 2 a day and he has 10 clients. Like he actually told me he was like bored out of his mind. So basically he's built a multiple 6-figure business that almost runs itself without him really even having to be involved because he's invested in team and automations and system. And that's why lesson number 11 is to invest in leverage, anything that can get you more output out of your time. So that's team, content, systems, automations, all that kind of stuff. Lesson number 12. So I'm sure you've seen the meme going around of comparing a $300 client to like a $3,000 client. And I think most people understand that the cheap clients are usually really high maintenance, but for some reason we all still pitch the cheap clients. So there's really 2 main problems with pitching cheap clients. The first is that you're going to spend the exact same amount of time working for them as you would for somebody with a higher budget. You just get paid less. less. And then the second is that they're usually just a lot higher maintenance, which means you have to have a lot more calls, a lot more revisions, and just all that kind of stuff. So why the heck do people still pitch then? And that's why lesson number 12 is to only pitch clients that can afford you and actually need your help. But then the question becomes, well, how do I find those people? So the last lesson is literally the key to 10xing your pricing, but it's also the biggest secret that no one is talking about. So if you want to be able to charge a premium price to premium clients, you have to be viewed as a premium service, which means that you have to be an expert at solving a very big problem for a very specific type of client. Now, if you want to see exactly how to do that for your business, then check out this video right here because I break it all down.